Melbourne is located in the southeastern corner of Australia. It's a big city, humming with activity at all hours in the day and night. On the outer fringe of Melbourne's northern suburbs lies Mernda. It's a quiet, modern neighbourhood that still holds the imprint of its rural past. It started out as farmland, known in the 1800s as Meringue South. It was the land of orchards and sheep stations before it took the name Mernda in 1913. By the 2000s, Mernda had transformed. It was now one of the fastest growing areas in Victoria. Farm blocks gave way to neat rows of family homes. Schools, supermarkets, and a shiny new train line followed, connecting the community to the wider city. One night in November of 2020, Aggie Manno was asleep in her bed in a tidy house nestled in one of the newer estates of Mernda. The home was still and dark, until a noise jolted her awake. She blinked, unsure if it had come from the world outside or from inside her dreams. But then she heard something else. It sounded like somebody gasping for breath. This wasn't a bad dream. It was real, but the nightmare had only just begun. It was in the suburb of Mernda that Celeste Manno had built a life. She was born on the 22nd of November 1996, the only daughter of Aggie and Tony Manno. From the very beginning, she was their light. The name Celeste had been chosen deliberately, lovingly, for its celestial meaning. Though her parents would eventually separate, their bond with Celeste remained unwavering. She grew up surrounded by love from her parents and her two brothers, Alessandro and Jaden. At the Manno household, life was one of tradition. Evenings often meant flour-dusted aprons and the scent of homemade pizza wafting from the kitchen. Lazy Sunday afternoons were spent lounging by the swimming pool. To Jaden, her older brother, Celeste was more than a sister. She was a guiding force. He later recollected. She was the most intelligent one of all of us, the best of all of us. There isn't a soul on this earth who could ever say a bad thing. When Jaden became a father, Celeste embraced the role of auntie with joy. Family wasn't just important to her, it was everything. She radiated a kind of grace that felt rare in her generation. Those who loved her said that she was elegant, thoughtful, even a little old-fashioned in a world that often rushes past tenderness. Her friend and colleague Bertine Rashi remembered her as a kind, loving, great friend to many. Celeste's bedroom wall bore a whiteboard filled with motivational quotes and gentle reminders. Each morning before anything else, she would pause to read them. At the very top was a single word, smile, and she meant it. To Celeste, a smile wasn't just an expression, it was a way to brighten up somebody else's day. Her godmother, Pina, described her as the sweetest, kindest person you could ever meet. And that kindness wasn't surface level. It was deeply ingrained in the way that she moved through the world. For 5 years, Celeste had volunteered with 7 Cups of Tea, an online platform that provides emotional support to people experiencing mental health challenges. The work was hard and it was unpaid, but Celeste never treated it like a burden. She carried that same empathy into her professional life. After completing a criminology and psychology degree at RMIT University, she accepted a job at a call centre in Mill Park, operated by Serco Asia Pacific. For many, the call centre was just a job, a stepping stone, a paycheck. But Celeste was different. She brought a quiet brilliance to the workplace. Her colleagues said that she had a positive energy. She was wise beyond her years. So much so that she was quickly promoted to team leader. But in that same workplace, Celeste had also caught the attention of someone else. Someone who was watching. Among the team members who briefly worked under Celeste's supervision at Serco was a man named Louis Seiko. He was 35 years old, more than a decade older than Celeste, and in many ways his story was one shaped by displacement and disappointment. Seiko had been born in Iraq during the oppressive reign of Saddam Hussein. In 1992, he and his family fled to Australia in search of something better. He was the eldest of 5 children, and with that came pressure, some spoken, some not. His younger brother, Lauren, would later make headlines after being sentenced to 6 years in a youth justice centre for the manslaughter of 22-year-old Matthew McAvoy. Louis on the surface had always appeared to be the opposite. He was studious and quiet. He excelled in maths and earned his way into university. But somewhere along that path, something began to fracture. His own family would later describe him as a loner and an introvert. Social cues escaped him. Human connection seemed to slip through his fingers. At university, he struggled. He felt invisible and rejected, and that sense of isolation seemed to harden something inside of him. Work didn't provide the redemption he may have hoped for. He drifted in and out of retail jobs, often unemployed, living on the fringe of professional life. Until April of 2019, when he joined Serco and was assigned to the team led by Celeste Manno. She treated him just like she treated everybody else, with respect, with professionalism, with the kind of quiet empathy that came so naturally to her. But Louis Seiko saw something else in her, something that was never there. Just 2 months into the job, Seiko was fired for ongoing performance issues. On his last day, Celeste walked him to the door, shook his hand, and wished him well. It was a simple, courteous goodbye, the kind of moment that might be forgotten by most. But for Seiko, it became something else entirely. He thanked her for her kindness and then, without warning, he leaned in and kissed her on the cheek. Celeste was startled. The gesture had crossed a line. It made her deeply uncomfortable, but she didn't dwell on it. She moved on. Or at least she tried to. A week later, a message arrived in her Instagram inbox. It was from Louis Seiko. He thanked her again for how she handled his termination, and then without warning, he declared his love for her. He wrote, "To put an end to my suffering, can you be direct with me and just tell me how you feel towards me?" Celeste was gracious. She always was. She responded, "Hi Louis, those are really sweet words and I appreciate you saying all of this. I'm surprised to read this as it's all new to me. As much as I appreciate it, I only feel a professional way towards you, and I wish you all the best towards your new job and journey." But Louis didn't go away. The messages kept coming. At first they were filled with admiration, odd in tone but not yet overly threatening. But it was clear he wasn't letting go. Celeste's discomfort grew, and eventually she told him plainly, "I would really appreciate if you could stop contacting me, as this is making me very uncomfortable." Seiko replied with something cold and cutting. "My impression of you has changed. You're no different to the majority of women. I will remember you in this lesson for all my life and devote every ounce of energy I have to climbing up and proving to the world that I'm somebody. This is my promise to you and final contact to you." But it wasn't his final contact. The messages continued. And when Celeste blocked him, another account popped up. Then another, and another, and another. Over the span of roughly a year, Seiko would send more than 140 messages to Celeste across various fake profiles. What had begun as an awkward infatuation had spiraled into something far darker. A fixation. An obsession. And Seiko knew it. In one message he admitted, "This obsession with you is an addictive and destructing feeling, interfering with my ability to concentrate, deal with others and go about my daily routine." In another he wrote, "I'm sorry but I can't stop thinking about you. I've never felt this way about anyone in my life. I'm totally captivated by you. You're all I think about." And then in December of 2019, the tone of the messages shifted. Louis Seiko started to send sexually explicit, derogatory and violent messages to Celeste. Celeste confided in those closest to her friends, her family, even her colleagues. And when the anxiety became too much, she went to the police. But what she was told was chilling in its indifference. There was nothing they could do. Seiko hadn't made direct threats. No physical crime had been committed. The advice she was given was to shut down her social media, start afresh, delete and block. Her mother Aggie would later say. The suggestion was to delete and block him or start a new account or get off social media. But Celeste resisted. Why should she be the one to disappear? Why should she erase parts of her life because of him? She left the police station shaken and still unprotected. The messages just kept coming. One day, Celeste told Seiko, "Both my family and police have been made aware of the situation." But that didn't deter him. He responded, "I feel a little bit hurt that you would go to that extent, Celeste. I wouldn't hurt a soul, especially you. Why do you see me as a threat? It's a genuine question that I may learn from by getting your answer." He just kept going even when Aggie warned him to stop contacting her daughter. She messaged him saying, "We will be going to the police again today. I've read very disgusting messages you have sent my daughter. How dare you?" Seiko replied, "I'm sorry, I didn't know what I was doing was disgusting, but I will stop contacting Celeste if that's all she wishes." But he didn't stop. Celeste became hyper-aware of her surroundings. After every shift at Serco, her co-workers would walk her to her car. They checked the parking lot, scanned the shadows. She told her supervisor, "He's really going to kill me." Whenever Celeste drove home, she would always call her mother and stay on the line. She had a plan. If she ever thought that she was being followed, she'd drive straight to the police station. Her mother later recollected. Celeste was always 100% sure he didn't know where we lived, but she checked her rearview mirrors constantly. Eventually, Celeste was able to apply for an intervention order. It was granted, an interim one, a piece of paper meant to create distance. But Celeste didn't feel safe. She knew what many victims of stalking know all too well, that court orders only matter to those who choose to obey them. After the intervention order was granted, a hush fell over Celeste's inbox. For the first time in months, there was no new messages. No disturbing DMs popping up under fake names, no explicit rants, no threats wrapped in declarations of obsession. There was finally silence. Her mother Aggie recalled the change in her daughter's mood. "My daughter felt safer. I thought hopefully it had scared him, and maybe he realised this was serious, and he needed to forget about Celeste." For a moment it felt like they could finally breathe again, like the system had worked the way it was supposed to. But the silence didn't last. Not long after, the messages started again. This time the tone was pleading. Luis Seiko messaged Celeste to beg her to drop the intervention order. He insisted he didn't understand that what he had done was wrong. He said he was confused, that he meant no harm. "I would never hurt a soul," he wrote. He asked why she had treated him like a threat. But Celeste saw through the performance. She didn't respond, she didn't engage, she went straight to the police. And this time, Seiko was arrested. When confronted with the reality of what he had done, Seiko broke down. He threatened to take his own life. But it wasn't remorse, it was manipulation. It was another tactic, another attempt to claw back control over somebody who had made it clear she wanted nothing to do with him. Seiko was charged with breaching the intervention order, but he was then released on summons. Celeste tried not to let it rattle her. She had already given too much of her energy, her sense of security and her peace of mind to this man. So she carried on with life. It was November of 2020 and Celeste was days away from celebrating her 24th birthday. It was something she had genuinely been looking forward to. Her family, her friends, the coconut cake her mum promised to bake. She was also looking forward to spending more time with her baby niece Daisy. Because of the COVID restrictions, she hadn't gotten to see her much. But things were easing. It felt like the beginning of normalcy, of life moving forward. And Celeste was in love. Her boyfriend Chris Risdale had brought a new light into her life. He was kind, thoughtful and safe. Celeste had already told her friends and family about him, but now she was ready to tell the world. The weekend before her birthday, Celeste and Chris took a photograph together. They were beaming, sitting side by side with arms around one another in a local pub. Chris later remembered, "We talked and joked about how this would be the first picture of us together on her social media, and she was so excited to share it with everyone." Celeste pulled out her phone, opened Instagram, and uploaded the photograph. It was a simple act that many of us do without thinking. But within hours, Celeste would be dead. It was just after 4 a.m. on the 16th of November 2020, less than 24 hours after Celeste had shared that photograph with her boyfriend, Chris. She had gone to bed that night smiling, unaware that somewhere across the city, a man she barely knew was staring at that same image with something far more dangerous than heartbreak. Louis Seiko had seen the post. He had saved the photograph to his phone. Then he'd searched for Chris's name online, on Google, LinkedIn, even tracing the location of the pub where the photo had been taken. In the early hours of that morning, under the cover of night, Seiko left his home in Roxburgh Park and began the half-hour drive to Mernda. The streets were still, the world asleep. But Seiko wasn't aimless. He was on a mission. Once he arrived at Celeste's quiet suburban street, he didn't park straight away. He circled the block over and over again, like a predator waiting for the right moment. Then he stopped the car. He got out. He ran to the house and scaled the side fence, like he had done it before. Peering through her bedroom window, he could see Celeste, fast asleep, unaware that danger had already stepped inside her world. Then, without hesitation, he smashed the window with a hammer. Celeste was jolted awake by the sound of shattering glass. She didn't even have time to scream. Within seconds, Seiko was inside her bedroom. He lunged at her, armed with a kitchen knife, and began stabbing her with terrifying force. Celeste fought back with everything she had. Her arms bore defensive wounds, but she was ambushed, trapped, and outmatched. Just next door, her mother Aggie stirred from sleep. She thought she'd heard something. Footsteps, a thud. She sat up in bed, unsure if it was real or just part of a dream. But then she heard it, gasping. She raced from her bedroom into Celeste's and then froze. Her daughter was lying on the floor, surrounded by a pool of blood. Her eyes were open but vacant. Her chest was rising and falling with a fragile, strained rhythm. Each breath was a struggle. Stab wounds covered her body and face. Aggie dropped to the floor beside her, cradled her, and called 000. She performed CPR and mouth to mouth, but each breath became weaker. And then there was stillness. While Aggie was desperately trying to save her daughter, Seiko had already fled from the scene. He drove straight to the Mernda police station. There he approached an officer calmly and just said 2 words, "She's dead." He gave them Celeste's address. Then he asked the officer to shoot him. By the time paramedics arrived at the house, Celeste Manno was already gone. She had been stabbed a total of 23 times, with a fatal wound through her heart. The family home was enveloped in crime scene tape as detectives and crime scene investigators descended on the scene. Police cordoned off the Manno residence. Inside, investigators took photographs of the bedroom, of the shattered window, the blood-stained sheets, and they bagged the kitchen knife into evidence. It had been left behind by Seiko as he made his getaway. Then slowly and carefully they carried Celeste's body out of the home. Outside, her mother, Aggie, stood frozen. And then she broke. She ran towards the tape, screaming, trying to reach her daughter one last time. Detectives held her back, their arms around her as she sobbed on the lawn. "How did I not protect her?" she cried. "There are no words for that kind of guilt. No comfort strong enough to reach her mother in that moment. Later, Aggie would say, "I couldn't believe what I walked into. You were lifeless. I'm never going to forget that image in my head. The look in your eyes, so distant, so far away. I knew you were gone, but I didn't want to believe what I was seeing." The community didn't need the full story to feel the weight of what had happened. Blood was still visible on the side gate from where Seiko had fled. News crews gathered outside, and neighbours stared in disbelief. And beneath the growing pile of flowers and candles, a makeshift memorial was beginning to take shape. As details emerged about Seiko's long campaign of stalking and harassment, public horror turned to outrage. He had been reported, he'd been charged, he had an intervention order against him, and yet he was free. Celeste's father, Tony, didn't hold back as he said, "It's got to be changed. It won't bring her back, but it's got to be changed. Too many scenarios have already happened. What's it going to take for the government to listen? It's not right. It's got to stop." Her brother Jaden echoed that same heartbreak as he said, "We need the government to listen. Everyone should have the right to live their lives, in their homes, in their bedrooms, on the streets. No one should be scared." In the days that followed, a petition was launched calling for tougher laws to protect victims of stalking and violence. It read in part, "Although there are laws in place and intervention orders can be granted, it's clear that this is not sufficient and more needs to be done. Far too many women have lost their lives at the hands of perpetrators." More than 8,000 people signed their names. The petition was tabled in state parliament. But for Celeste's family, that was only the beginning. On the 19th of November, just 3 days after the murder, Louis Seiko was moved from hospital to the police headquarters. He was charged with 1 count of murder. And while the legal process was moving slowly forward, Celeste's loved ones had something far more devastating to face: saying goodbye. Towards the end of the month, mourners gathered at the Whittlesea Funeral Home for Celeste's service. It was a crisp day, and grief clung in the air. Her white casket was carried by her father, her brothers, and her boyfriend, Chris. Inside, loved ones stood up one by one to speak about Celeste. Her mother, Aggie, delivered a heartbreaking eulogy. "I can't imagine the horror you must have felt to have been awoken by some monster. I didn't get there in time, and I'm so angry at myself. I am so sorry. I am ashamed of myself because you believed your mum would always protect you." Aggie said that despite everything Seiko had done, Celeste still had compassion for him. She'd even felt sorry for him. But that compassion had been met with violence. And Aggie's voice broke as she said, "You forgave everything and everyone, sweetie, but not me. I'm not forgiving. I want him to burn in hell." Her younger brother, Alessandro, said he would never again play a basketball game without imagining her cheering from the stands. He said, "You're my sister, my best friend, and most importantly, the most amazing, beautiful person in my life. I can't believe you're gone, and I can't hug and kiss you every day after you come home from work." Jaden, the eldest, said that the grief they carried was immeasurable. He said, "We are the luckiest people on earth to have had you in our lives at all. You were your family's rock, pillar of strength and protector." Tony, her father, had his words read aloud by someone else. He couldn't bring himself to speak. "Nothing in this earth will ever be able to replace you," he said. In the months after Celeste's murder, her family's grief transformed into a powerful force for change. Aggie became the face of the movement. She demanded for better protection for women like Celeste. Women who had done everything right, who had reported their stalkers, who had followed the rules. Aggie pushed for legislation that would ensure high-risk stalkers were no longer treated as low-threat nuisances. She called for violent perpetrators to be fitted with GPS trackers, and for breaches of intervention orders to carry immediate jail time. Her voice shook as she stood before Victoria Parliament and said, "I visit my daughter's grave every day, but I can't talk to her because I don't know what to say. We felt safe. I thought we were safe. There may be laws and legislations out there, but they're not being addressed. In response, the Victorian government launched an urgent review into intervention orders. At the same time, Victoria Police announced an internal investigation into how officers had handled Celeste's case. Aggie was clear-eyed about the failures. "I hold two very responsible for Celeste. First is Victoria Police, because if they had done certain things differently, maybe Seiko could have been locked up before he did anything. Second is Seiko himself." But while Aggie was fighting for reform, the man who murdered her daughter was locked in a legal limbo. While on remand in a protective custody unit, Louis Seiko attempted to take his own life in the exercise yard. He was rushed to hospital, then placed in an observation cell. He was under 24-hour monitoring and remained isolated from the other prisoners. In September, Seiko appeared via video link and formally pleaded not guilty to the murder. His lawyer, Sam Norton, said that the plea was based on medical opinion. An insanity defence was clearly on the table. But by October, that medical opinion was deemed inconclusive. The defence requested a second evaluation, calling it a very complex situation in regard to Seiko's mental state. Dr. Andrew Carroll later concluded that Seiko was unfit to stand trial, and that he would likely remain unfit for at least the next 12 months. That ruling was devastating, because if a judge agreed, Seiko wouldn't face a murder trial. Instead, he would be moved to a secure psychiatric facility. And under Australian law, if he were ever deemed well enough, he could be quietly released back into the community, sometimes within years. The Manno family feared what that could mean, that Celeste's killer might never be held accountable in court, that her death would go untried and unpunished. As the case stagnated, Victoria Police rolled out a new tool called the Screening Assessment for Stalking and Harassment. It allowed officers to better identify red flags, like obsessive behaviours, past criminal charges and patterns of escalation. It was designed to stop stalkers before they reached the point of violence. If someone was assessed as high risk, they would now be subject to more intensive police scrutiny. But for Celeste and her family, it had come too late. The review into her murder revealed what many already suspected, that stalking allegations in Victoria were often trivialised, and victims like Celeste were left to fend for themselves. Instead of police filing orders, the burden was on victims to apply for them. Many never did. Many didn't know how to, and even when they did, enforcement was inconsistent at best. The Victorian Law Reform Commission issued 46 recommendations in total, including that police initiate intervention orders on behalf of victims, that officers receive better training in recognising and responding to stalking, that the overwhelmed intervention order system be overhauled, and that the public be better educated on what stalking actually entails. All of these steps, it was hoped, would prevent another tragedy like Celeste's. But as the reforms moved forward, Seiko's case remained in limbo. In May, 2 expert psychiatrists gave conflicting assessments. One believed Seiko was fit to stand trial, the other disagreed. He was still in isolation, still refusing to take his medication, still claiming that prison staff were trying to kill him. One psychiatrist warned that if Seiko simply agreed to take the medication he was rejecting, he would likely become competent enough to face court. But for now, he remained locked away. And the decision on his fitness to stand trial rested solely with the judge. If that judge ruled he was unfit, Seiko could be detained under the Mental Health Act. But that detention wouldn't be permanent. He could be released in secret, with no accountability and no justice. And that, to Celeste's family, was an unbearable prospect. In March of 2023, more than 2 years after Celeste was taken, Louis Seiko finally changed his plea. He appeared in court and pleaded guilty to the murder of Celeste Manno. Her mother, Aggie, sat just feet away from the man who had taken her daughter's life. She never looked away from him. Afterwards, she said, "I can't believe that this demon was actually within reach. I just wanted him to feel that I never took my eyes from him." Seiko never once looked back. The guilty plea came after a long and winding legal process. The previously scheduled fitness hearing had been vacated, after further psychiatric evaluations determined that Seiko was fit to stand trial. During those evaluations, Seiko had attempted to claim that a hallucination named Isha had appeared in his car that night, telling him he needed to act like a criminal and end it. He described Isha as a strange man with a big nose and large ears who coaxed him into the attack. But the psychiatrists unanimously concluded that Seiko was faking. They noted that he exaggerated his symptoms and made inconsistent statements. In one disturbing comment, Seiko remarked that Celeste appeared larger than he remembered. He also claimed that when he saw the photo of Celeste and Chris, he believed that Chris's smile was laughing maniacally at him. Despite the theatrics, the professionals agreed. Seiko was not suffering from psychosis at the time of the murder. His own defense attorney, Sam Norton, conceded that the mental impairment defense could no longer be advanced. And faced with no other legal option, Seiko pleaded guilty. But just 3 months later, he changed his mind again. In a letter to the Supreme Court, he asked to dump his lawyer and revoke his guilty plea. He wrote, "The last hearing where I pleaded guilty, that decision was made on the day of the hearing. I felt I was under pressure and still haven't had my answers met." To Celeste's family, it wasn't much of a surprise. Aggie said, "He's been playing the system for 2.5 years because of all the loopholes available to him." Seiko then retained a new defense attorney, Tim Marsh, who requested yet another mental competency evaluation. But days later, Marsh informed the court that Seiko no longer wished to revoke his guilty plea. The delays only continued. In January of 2024, just as the case appeared ready to move forward, Seiko dumped his defense attorney again, this time declaring he would represent himself. At a pre-sentencing hearing, he addressed the court directly. He claimed that his former legal team had undermined him, and that he disputed the forensic evidence regarding Celeste's injuries. In one of the most shocking moments in court, Seiko said, "I know and believe I only inflicted 2 wounds, and that the 21 other wounds were a result of glass-inflicted injuries." It was a cruel, delusional statement, and it devastated Celeste's family, once again forcing them to listen as Seiko tried to rewrite reality and reduce the brutality of what he had done. The legal delays had dragged on for years, but finally a sentencing date was approaching. And for the Manno family, after years of agony, justice was now within reach. The sentencing phase finally went ahead on the 29th of January. The courtroom filled with Celeste's loved ones. The grief in the room was palpable. The court then heard details of the stalking campaign that escalated into murder, and once again Seiko clung to his delusions. He maintained that he had only stabbed Celeste twice, insisting that the remaining 21 stab wounds had been caused by broken glass when he smashed through her bedroom window. But forensic pathologist Dr. Paul Bedford firmly dismissed that claim. He told the court that no glass was found in Celeste's wounds, and that each of the 23 injuries had clearly been inflicted with a knife. When Seiko began cross-examining Dr. Bedford, Celeste's family walked out of the courtroom. Security footage was then presented. It showed Seiko running from his car to Celeste's front door, knife in hand. He disputed that as well. "I say that I walked briskly," he told the court. Then came the testimony of Dr. Rajan Darji, a forensic psychiatrist who had assessed Seiko. He testified that in his opinion, Seiko had been driven by jealous rage after seeing a photo of Celeste with her new boyfriend. A photo that, in his words, was the straw that broke the camel's back. Dr. Darji diagnosed Seiko with a severe personality disorder, depressive disorder and body dysmorphia. He added, "I've never seen anyone with such an extreme personality disorder who wasn't also psychopathic." He said that during the murder, Seiko was not only filled with rage, but also wanted to erase the entire situation. "That's why he committed the murder in my view," he said. Dr. Darji also testified that Seiko posed a moderate to high risk of stalking again, and if he did, there was a high risk of serious violence. He said this risk extended even to female prison staff if they showed him kindness. He said, "I'm not saying he will, but if dynamics similar to those that led to the offending happen in prison, you can see it happening." The court also heard chilling evidence of premeditation. Months before the murder, Seiko had purchased the knife. He had tracked down Celeste's home, examining floor plans to determine her bedroom, and repeatedly drove past the house to confirm her location. The prosecution argued that this demonstrated clear and deliberate planning. Then came the most emotional part of the hearing, the victim impact statements. Celeste's father, Tony, spoke about the life he had lost. "The opportunity to walk her down the aisle and watch her grow into a mother was taken from me. My heart will be broken for the rest of my life." Her mother, Aggie, addressed the court next. She said she didn't know him and she didn't want to know him. He was a co-worker to her, nothing more. He wasn't a boyfriend, an ex, or a friend. She didn't provoke or insult him. She had no interest in him, and he couldn't accept that. Aggie then turned to Seiko directly. He sat at the defence table with his head bowed. She shouted at him to look at her and then said, "Look ahead, I'm here, you gutless wonder. I hate you. And the only other person I hate more than you is me. You extinguished one of the only two reasons I lived for. She was everything to me, nothing to you. My sweetie felt safe with me. I thought she was safe with me, but she wasn't, was she? I couldn't protect her from you. We had no idea you knew where we lived. The one place we felt safe was home." Seiko began to shake his head and then, in a disturbing scene, started violently hitting the side of his head with his own hand. Aggie looked directly at him and said, "You're a beast. You're an evil, repulsive, demonic beast." She begged Justice Dixon to impose a life sentence without parole. Justice Dixon then handed down her decision. She said she had taken the victim impact statements seriously. She acknowledged the immense pain that Seiko had caused. She noted the guilty plea but emphasised that the murder was planned, premeditated, and carried out with chilling efficiency. She said to Seiko, "You made sure you had the advantage over her." She acknowledged that he suffered from mental illness, including depression and a personality disorder, but she said these didn't excuse or fully explain what he had done to Celeste. Justice Dixon described the murder as utterly cowardly. And then, in a move that shocked many in the courtroom, she granted leniency. She cited Seiko's mental illness as grounds to moderate his sentence. Seiko was then sentenced to 36 years in prison with a non-parole period of 30 years. He could have been sentenced to life without parole. The courtroom was stunned. Outside court, Aggie held the speech she had prepared, expecting a life sentence. She ripped it up. Instead, she said, "We were forced to trust the system that we lost faith in 3 years ago. It failed Celeste then, and it failed her again now. Today's outcome proves just how flawed the justice system is." Visibly distraught, she continued, "Protecting the community from monsters like Seiko was clearly not a consideration of the court. It's outrageous. Absolutely unbelievable that the court decided to grant him mercy, even though he showed Celeste none. Quite clearly, his right to mercy was more important than her right to life." Well, that is it for this episode of Morbidology. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I'd like to say a massive thank you to my newest supporters up on Patreon: Linnea, Whitney, Sarah, Brittany, Tanika, Barrett, and Joni. The link to Patreon is in the show notes if you'd like to join. I upload ad-free and early release episodes, behind the scenes, bonus episodes of Morbidology Plus, and I also send out merch along with a thank you card. Morbidology Plus is also available through Apple subscriptions, where you get ad-free, early release and bonus episodes. Remember to check us out at morbidology.com for more information about this episode and to read some true crime articles. Until next time, take care of yourselves, stay safe, and have an amazing week.